Hello, my name is Jeremy Gibbert, and I'm going to be presenting a paper called Integrating the Sustainable Development Goals into Green and Sustainable Building Rating Tools. As background to the paper, it's important to think about some of the kind of global issues. So the global issues are achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and also some of the climate change carbon emission targets. And if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, it's clear that many countries are not going to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We can also look at construction and the building industry. And again, it's clear that the Sustainable Development Goals haven't really been addressed. So we need to ask whether there's more that we should be doing. We can then look at some of the detailed guidance tools, the rating tools, so things like green building tools, and ask whether these address the SDGs. And if they don't, what are the gaps and what are the improvements and recommendations that can be made. So the structure of the presentation is firstly a quick introduction to the Sustainable Development Goals. Secondly, an aspect of the paper was an analysis of the SDGs to look at implications for buildings. Thirdly, we select two tools, the Code for Sustainable Homes and the Sustainable Building Assessment Tool, and introduce those and then evaluate their criteria in terms of support for the SDGs. And then finally, the conclusions and recommendations. So firstly, the Sustainable Development Goals are 17 goals that have been agreed on by most countries and have been developed by the UN and are being tracked by the UN. And there's some very nice websites that you can use to look at progress. And this particular dashboard is for South Africa. And it shows that progress in many cases isn't fast enough. Many of the squares are red or orange. Many of the arrows are horizontal. They're not pointing upwards. And it shows that much needs to be done in terms of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the key things that have made this much worse in the last 2 or 3 years is COVID. So this particular graph shows how there's been very good progress in terms of reducing levels of poverty in the last 5 or 6 years. And then around 2019, as a result of COVID, there's been a huge spike upwards in terms of these blue lines, which show that a lot of the progress that have been made really over the last 2 or 3 years is likely to be reversed. What is also interesting is to look at the IPCC reports, the International Panel on Climate Change, and this particular graph picture is from a report from 2018, and what it is interesting for is the change in approach that it shows. So firstly, very clearly, we have to move away from business as usual, which is totally unsustainable. We had moved to a stage where we were looking at incremental change, particularly technological change in terms of carbon emissions, so better light bulbs, better heat pumps, etc. And really we are now moving to a stage where we can't just look at lower emissions. We actually need to look at achieving the SDGs. And this is a much more transformative approach, and this is really being advocated by organizations like the IPCC. So one of the first things we do in the paper is look at the implications of the SDGs for buildings. And we take each of the SDGs and unpack that and extrapolate the implications. And there's quite a nice table in the paper that shows those implications. So the first tool that we look at is the Code for Sustainable Homes. This is developed by the Building Research Establishment in the UK, very widely used for homes, and it measures performance of housing, of homes, in terms of energy and CO2 emissions, water, materials, surface water runoff, waste, pollution, health and well-being, management, and ecology. So underneath each of those headings, a set of sub-criteria that are used to measure the performance of housing. The second tool that we look at is called the Sustainable Building Assessment Tool. This was developed in South Africa and uses quite a wide range of criteria to measure performance, including energy, water, waste, materials, biodiversity, transport, resource use, management, products and services, local economy, access, health, education, inclusion, and social cohesion. So one of the first tasks we do is to take each of the tools, look at the detailed criteria in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals, and then present the results as a matrix. And so the first matrix shows the results for the Code for Sustainable Homes. And what this shows is it shows that there's direct support for the following SDGs: 3, health, 6, water and sanitation, 7, energy, 11, sustainable settlements, 13, climate change, 15, sustainable ecosystems. We do the same for the Sustainable Building Assessment Tool, and what you can see here again is the matrix that shows the results. And what this shows is it shows the SBAT provides direct support for food security, health, education, water and sanitation, energy, sustainable economic growth, sustainable industrialization, reducing inequality, sustainable settlements, sustainable consumption and production, and climate change and sustainable ecosystems. What we then do is pull those results into a summary table with the first column showing all the SDGs, the second column showing the results for sustainable homes, and the third column showing the results for the Sustainable Building Assessment Tool. And what this shows is that there's very clear direct support for 6 SDGs in the Code for Sustainable Homes and direct support for 12 SDGs in the Sustainable Building Assessment Tool. So to come to the conclusions and recommendations, firstly, both the tools support SDGs 3, 6, 7, 11, 13 and 15. The Code for Sustainable Homes does not directly support other SDGs, whereas the Sustainable Building Assessment does support education, economic growth and employment, and reducing inequality and sustainable consumption production. Neither of the tools address SDGs 5, 14, 16 and 17. So to come to the recommendations, really the study makes the case that new tools, the next generation of green and sustainable building assessment tools, should be more aligned to the SDGs and support SDGs better. It suggests that there are criteria in the SBAT, the Sustainable Building Assessment Tool, that are relevant. So things like local economy, resource use, education, inclusion, that may be useful to look at in terms of those new criteria. Thank you very much. If there are any questions or interest in finding out more, please feel free to get in touch. Thank you very much.